Well, hello and welcome back all my loyal YouTube browsers and subscribers, and thanks for joining me once again as we take a brief look at what was another iconic motocross machine from the 1970s. So just stay with me as we have a look at a 1977 Maico 250 twin shock. Now, this particular bike was yet another machine I came across on my travels a few years ago, and it was actually part of a private collection that the owner had at the time, and he had quite a few other classics as well that were worthy of some airtime on my channel. So just look out for more of these fantastic bikes from this private owner's collection coming soon to my YouTube channel. Now, as far as I'm led to believe, the bike is more or less an original machine from that year, although please don't accept that particular statement as gospel, as I'm only acting on information given by the bike's owner that this bike is a 1977 machine. But nevertheless, for our particular YouTube purposes, we will go along with the fact that it is definitely a 1977 bike. Now, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you about the background and history of these legendary Maicos, and during the early 1970s, the German Maico motorcycle manufacturing company were beginning to make their mark on the off-road world with these excellent and very quick 1977 250s. Now, these 250s had a chrome moly steel chassis with the twin double down tubes at the front of the frame. Now, the chassis by all accounts was very good geometry wise, and the bike was light enough to throw around and had a very decent rate of turn when it was required. Now, the motor was of course a single cylinder 2-stroke piston port affair with a 5-speed gearbox, a wet multi-plate clutch, which was of course connected to the crankshaft by a double row primary chain. Now, of course, these Maico clutches incorporated those quite bizarre conical washers which they used as clutch return springs, and the very funny thing is that they actually worked very well. Now, of course, many of these Maicos used Bing carburetors, and this 1977 bike was certainly no different. And although the Bing carburetors were not the most sophisticated piece of hardware for 1977, they were still superb for supplying the fuel needed for these Maico machines. Now, the motor had a bore of 76mm and a stroke of 54mm, and because this was of course a 2-stroke engine, would be powered by a premix of oil and fuel, which was of course mixed before being added to the tank. Now, the front forks on these 1977 bikes were decent enough for the period, although they were certainly not the best that you could buy for your money at the time, because other manufacturers were offering much better suspension systems on their own machines. But for your average rider, they were good at what they did, and they also had a bit of scope for suspension adjustment. And also, of course, these conical alloy brake hubs have been a Maico trademark for many years, and do their job very well on these old 1970 machines. Now, if my memory serves me right, I think it would have been a pair of Corti-Cosa rear shocks that were fitted to these bikes originally in 1977, and these particular shocks fitted to our machine look very similar, although once again I can't verify that fact, but they are almost certainly period correct for this bike. Also in 1977, Maico were still using this coffin style alloy fuel tank on their machines, and this was to be the last year that Maico used this style on their off-road machines, because Maico then turned to using the newer teardrop style tank on the following 1978 and 79 models. But nevertheless, this coffin style tank was a trademark of these early 1970s Maico twin shock machines. Now, our featured example again looks like it still has retained many of its original controls, including these quality Magura levers and these old style motocross handlebars with the fixed crossbar still in place. Now, also, as far as I'm aware, this bike is still sporting a period correct exhaust system and tailpipe, although I'm not going to fully commit myself and say it's an original item from that period, but it certainly is as near as damn it to the original design. Now, of course, the name Maico was originally made up using an abbreviation of the two words Maisch and Company. Now, that was, of course, when the Maisch brothers Wilhelm and Otto first made the Maico motorcycle factory and joined these two words together to leave the Maico as their new company trading name. Now, the 1977 Maico's had a considerable seat for an older motocross machine, and it was a very comfortable part of the bike compared to many of its predecessors, which were often very flat and did not have much cushioning effect where you needed it, especially if it was on a bumpy racetrack. Now, the side panels are also still in very good condition on this bike, considering the machine's age. But as yet again, these original items are very hard to come by, especially if you're restoring or rebuilding an original example of this 1977 bike. But of course, you have to remember, in terms of its size, the Maico company were a small European minnow in the off-road world during the 1970s, and they certainly did not have the money and resources the big four Japanese firms enjoyed through that period. But nevertheless, Maico's factory riders were achieving numerous top 3 finishes on a regular basis in the World Motocross Championships. Also, these 1977 bikes were made famous for Maico when the likes of Adolf Wheel rode them to many successes in the 1970s, and that was of course while he was a works rider for the German company. Of course, after the 1970s, Maico would later go on to build a bike that is now universally agreed as probably the best open class motorcycle to ever grace a scramble track, and that was of course the mighty 1981 490 Mega 2. But for me personally, this is still a very nice example of a late 1970s Maico dirt bike, and for me personally, I think it's a cracking looking little machine. But please stay tuned to my YouTube channel for more of these interesting and classic dirt bikes, as there are many more vintage machines similar to this already waiting to be aired here on my channel. So thanks again for watching, and if you like what you see, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button.